I've read books that are cozy. I've read books that claim to be cozy, but are honestly the opposite of cozy to me and somewhat traumatizing. Let's talk about whether or not cozy fantasy actually works as a subgenre and where it works if it does, and the mismarketing of cozy. You've probably heard about the rise of a subgenre of fantasy that has taken the cardigan-wearing, tea-drinking, board game-playing, puzzle-doing girlies by storm. If you have Evermore on repeat, you have a favorite warm blankie, and when you're asked to describe your perfect day, you don't say,
"I'd have to say April 25th, because it's not too hot, not too cold. All you need is a light jacket."
because instead you want it to be an autumn day with a warm cup of something in your hands, then you've already heard about cozy fantasy, or it's about to become your favorite thing. So I recently read and reviewed, much to my chagrin, The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic, which despite the author saying, "It wasn't me marketing my book as cozy fantasy, that was my publisher. No, my book's not cozy." Yes, she did, more than once. And it was not cozy, and I did hate it, and I did feel bamboozled. But I just finished The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst, which was cozy. But did I love it? At least it didn't have an on-page suicide attempt, like The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic. One element of making cozy fantasy cozy is food, because cozy is comforting, and food is a comforting thing. Food is wrapped up in nostalgia and comfort. Cozy fantasy is categorized by its lower stakes. This doesn't mean that nothing happens, it just often can feel like nothing overall really happens. So for us plot girlies, when we're opening these books, we're like, hey, where's the plot? Stuff is happening, it's just not usually life or death, and it gets wrapped up pretty quickly and cleanly. And sometimes the stakes can just be learning a new recipe and failing at it until you don't fail at it anymore and suddenly you have thumbprint cookies. So in The Spell Shop, the main character is like, I need to hide the fact that I'm doing magic spells. We will set up a shop and it will not outwardly appear to be a magic shop. I will sell jam. Does she know how to make jam? No, but that doesn't stop her from trying a new thing. And honestly, she inspired me. So with the help of today's sponsor, which is Craftsy, I tried to make something kind of daunting that I've never made before, which is creme brulee. If you don't know, Craftsy is an online community for the crafters, makers, and bakers who want to advance their creative skills or learn some new ones. They have over 2,000 classes you can take, not just baking, but there's painting and drawing and sewing and cooking and crochet. I know you cozy people love your crochet. You probably crocheted the blanket that you're laying in right now watching this video. The classes are all step-by-step and they have downloadable resources to make it super easy for you. I love to bake. I love sweets, which is part of why I think that people recommend cozy books to me, is because everybody knows I love a dessert and cozy books are like, here's a dessert for a book. But I've made jam before and I wanted to be like Keela, not in the jam making, but in the trying something new, Keela being the main character from The Spell Shop. So I attempted not just creme brulee, which is new to me, but drum roll please, pumpkin creme brulee. Craftsy broke this down into instructions so simple that even I can do it, with Carlos supervising and using the torch thing. I've been using Craftsy to help me elevate my cake decorating skills, which I'm still working on making a rose, but also I've been using it to try new variations on recipes with Carlos and the kids. They're not in the recipes, they're helping me with the recipes, just FYI. The recipe didn't call for Carlos in the ingredients. I recently used Craftsy to try a new variation on cinnamon rolls with coffee brown butter icing. I've used Craftsy to take on recipes that I also felt daunting, like cake batters that have meringue in them. When I learned to bake, I learned to bake with all vegan ingredients, and that's always my default. So learning to bake with eggs is actually quite new to me. So meringue was like a whole new world for me. And Craftsy's made it so simple for me. They can make your creative endeavors super simple for you too. With over 2,000 classes in more than 20 creative categories, there's always something new to learn. Get cozy with your favorite book wrapped up in a blanket you made or with a dessert that you made. The first 1,000 people to click the link in the description below will get a full year of premium membership to Craftsy for only $1.49 for their first Craftsy membership. Click that link below to get started. Let me know what creative, cozy endeavors you are taking on, especially as we get closer and closer to fall. And thanks again to Craftsy for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so I have complaints about this genre, but theoretically it should be something I love. It's just my hypothesis is that there's never going to be this sounds kind of cynical. My hypothesis is that there's never going to be a cozy book that I give 5 stars to the most I think, because of the genre conventions of cozy, the most I think I can give a cozy book is 4 stars, which I think it's worth reading any book, even if you think you're gonna hate it. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but I think reading is reading, and I'm still gonna read cozy books because I am curious to a fault, and I wanna talk about books even if I don't like them, maybe especially when I don't like them. But I think that most of the cozy books I'm gonna end up giving a 3 to 4, and it's because I've said it before, I'll say it a million times more, I am a plat girly. So a lot of me reading cozy books is just me saying, hey, could we maybe get to a point? I would like a point now. So let's talk about the history of cozy, how it came to be. 2 cozy books that I have recently read, one of which I hated and gave 1 star, one of which I didn't hate but I didn't love, and another that I'm just starting that I have higher hopes for. Cozy, and I'm gonna come back to what I think the etymology of this is, but cozy I think sprung a lot from the pandemic as a subgenre of fantasy, cozy fantasy. Now, there is now cozy horror, and I just saw this book advertised as a cozy dystopian, which I'm a little confused on that, but I talked to the queen of cozy, Meg, my lovely friend Meg from Meg's Tea Room, and she said that she can classify one other book, which is this book, as cozy dystopian. So apparently that is a thing as well. This is not my genre. I'm not saying it can't be. I'm just saying that like my preferred genre is always going to be high fantasy. But when I have questions about cozy, I tend to defer to Meg from Meg's Tea Room. Funny enough, in doing research for this video, not only had I texted Meg, but I'll mention this article later. I was reading this article and Meg got brought into the conversation. I'm like, that's my friend. All right. I got off on a tangent already. Let's rein it back in, guys. Okay, I say as if you're responsible for me not being able to stay on task. Cozy as a genre, particularly cozy fantasy, again, there are factions now. Cozy sprang out of the pandemic. We were watching Gilmore Girls. We were learning how to bake sourdough, which if you want to learn how to bake sourdough, again, going back to Craftsy, they can teach you. My sister was one of the sourdough people of the pandemic. It got her into sourdough just like everybody else on TikTok. She wasn't even on, I'm doing it again. We were playing Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing because the world was burning down around us. Frankly, it's loosely felt like that since 2016, but somebody opened the Hellmouth in Sunnydale in 2020 and it's been downhill from there. A lot of the stuff that we used to find comforting either wasn't doing the trick or we like honed in on it. Like, I don't know about you, but I think I played more Sims in 2020 than any other year of my life. Like, I would put the kids to bed and I would just be on Sims while listening to my audiobook. Dystopian is kind of making a comeback now, but most of us were not reading dystopian in 2016 through 2020 because reasons. We have a major rise of Christofascism post-2016. Don't really want to read a dystopian around then. Well, most people don't. I was, but most people didn't. The horrors persisted, but most of us did not. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree is sort of seen as like the defining moment of when cozy fantasy started. I don't know if you will disagree with that, but that's sort of like what the internet thinks, is that suddenly, you know, post 2020, Legends and Lattes comes out and people are like, I want this all the time in every book I read. People were like crying out for more of this cozily. It was a story about a retired mercenary who happens to be an orc who opens up a coffee shop in a fantasy world in a little city with a precious little rat who creates a version of cinnamon buns. Everybody was like, I loved this, sign me the fuck up for more. I have not read it, but again, going back to like Meg from Meg's Tea Room, she's a huge fan of Legends and Lattes. My friend Allie, who helped me with this video, huge fan of Legends and Lattes. I'm a huge fan of you, Allie. You are the best. The story is not devoid of conflict, but it is easily described as low stakes. Low stakes and high. Aww. There's some romantic tension going on with a pretty succubus. There's a mysterious figure who may or may not try to extort a protection fee a la The Godfather out of our main character, but it's never really that deep. Legends and Lattes and its prequel Bookshops and Bone Dust don't stress out its readers, which I suddenly realized realize in doing the research for this video, in doing the reading for this video, maybe I like to be stressed out. Maybe if I'm focusing on the stress that the characters are going that doesn't actually have to do with me and my real life, I feel better. I feel better when the stress is not about me. But in a cozy fantasy, people are looking to escape into something that has very little stress. The stuff that you experience in a typical fantasy, the nail-biting feeling of, oh shit, what's about to happen? Is the Dark Lord coming to power? Will Sauron win? Will the Nightbringer from the Ember and the Ashes win? That's a stressful series. Actually, I think I'm starting to realize that the more stressed out I am, the higher the star rating. Oh no. But the fate of the world is not on the line in cozy fantasy. The fate of whether or not your recipe is going to work out is on the line. There's no evil darkness threatening to sweep in and turn the land to ash or whatever. No one is going to be brutally murdered or boned by the Fae. If there's violence, it's absolutely minimal and it's only there to push what small amounts of plot there is forward, and sometimes there is no plot at all. A lot of these stories are considered very character-driven stories. Low plot, all vibes. You either fall in love with the characters and you have and the setting and have a good time, or you don't. And again, that's not to say zero stakes. Low stakes is not zero. All stories have to have some kind of conflict to propel them forward. So in the spell shop, the conflict is that this character is doing magic without the seal of approval from the Empire, and she could get in trouble for this. You need something going on in the character's life in order to make you marginally interested in reading, but you don't really have to like hold on to a lot of plot details dearly and keep them at the forefront of your mind in order to know what's going on. You're mostly there for the vibes in a cozy fantasy. So The Spell Shop, again, by Sarah Beth Durst, is a good example of a book that can often just feel like you're getting a warm hug, but for cozy fantasy readers, it's also not going to be boring. Our main character, Keela, at the beginning of the book, is in a library that is burning down. So it actually sounds like it starts with a lot of stakes, right? She's living the dream, my dream, living in a library in a place called Elysium, which is sort of like the capital of the Empire, when a revolution begins and takes over the Empire and throws the Emperor out the window. Again, this is sounding like a lot more stakes than is actually present in this book, because the revolution and the Empire have little to nothing to do with Keela herself. The Empire has been very strict about magic and about education, access to educational materials like the library that she's working in. And the revolutionaries have had it. Now, I didn't really understand what commentary, if any, we were making about the revolutionaries. Some of it felt, frankly, like a little bit like anti-communist rhetoric in a way that sounds like a very American view of what communism is, which I've learned to be very careful about because I was taught a lot of incorrect information about what communism is. I couldn't ever define it. I just knew it was bad. So that was a little weird, and it also never got worked out in this book. Like, I don't really understand what happened with the revolutionaries, but okay. So Keela, our main character, and her companion, who is a sentient spider plant named Kaz, who is terrified of everything. Kaz would be a cozy fantasy reader because Kaz gets stressed out very easily. They flee the library as it's burning and they take as many books as they can carry. They get on a boat and they're like, where do we go? And Keela says, well, I could head back to my home, the place that me and my parents originally came from. So back on her home island, she goes back to the cottage that her parents still own, and she finds that the island is struggling because of the intense restrictions on magic that were placed by the Empire upon citizens. So citizens are not allowed to use magic themselves. They need like somebody from the Empire, specifically like a sorcerer from the Empire, to come in and do magic for them. It's all very regulated. So she risks consequences when she, using these books that she saved / stole from a burning library, comes in and starts doing magic to help the island, because the island's issues are to do with, well, honestly, this was like slight commentary on how like climate change affects the environment and produce and things like that, which is awesome because that's something that I have, you're never going to see it, but I have this manuscript that I'm writing where that happens, where the mining of a particular material by the elite causes climate change that affects everything throughout the earth, and it affects trade and resources and stuff. So that's happening here, except it's just like island impact. They don't have any trade going on from this island to other islands. It's just them. They can't seem to grow enough food to sustain themselves anymore. And they are normally helped out by there's like these giant mer horses, and they are part of the ecosystem, but the mer horses are not foaling enough. They're not creating enough young to sustain this like farming practice. And so she comes in and she's like, I could maybe read those books and like help out a little, except things keep going awry because she doesn't know exactly what she's doing. She's, learning as she goes. And so she accidentally creates an apple bird and creates singing trees, and people are like, that's kind of suspicious. So you can see that there are stakes. But because we have been promised a cozy, warm, and fuzzy good time, we don't really have to stress that anything terrible is going to happen to Keela. You know the whole time that everything's going to be fine. And so for me, my thing is, I like to not know. I like to not know whether or not everybody's going to be okay in the end. One of my favorite series, again, is An Ember in the Ashes. You can rest assured that people are not going to be okay in the end of An Ember in the Ashes. People are going to die. People you love in that series are going to die. And I think that this is not just a problem in cozy fantasy. For me, it might not be a problem for you, but this is also my problem in most of Sarah J. Maas's books. All the other problems I have with her aside, this is a problem I have with Sarah J. Maas books. This is a problem I have with Fourth Wing. Y'all never want to kill off characters because you want to keep them so that you can have your on-page romances and your funny moments, but you're sacrificing the stakes, the like really hard-hitting moments, by just killing off side characters that we spent all of like 5 minutes with. There's a reason why I have an Ember in the Ashes tattoo, and I do not have other tattoos for other series. Don't be afraid to kill your characters. I want to cry, but that's because I am a reader who loves high stakes and rawness and sobbing in my bed at 11 p.m. Ask Natalie. She just got a message from me when I finished a book last week where I said, I don't think I'm going to emotionally recover from this. And you know what? I stand by that. And it's because somebody that I love dearly died, and it was painful, and it was kind of mean of the author, but like, I want authors to be mean to me because then I'm gonna give you 5 stars. I mean that in a fictional context. I'm not gonna say anything else. But if you don't need people to die and therefore you are sobbing uncontrollably in order to have a great time, you're just different from me, and that's fine. And you might give every cozy fantasy book you read 5 stars. For me, I want to be emotionally damaged. I want to see the revolutions, and I want to see the breakdown in like the revolutionaries and the conflicts even amongst the revolutionaries themselves. Whereas in the spell shop, for instance, yeah, there's a revolution, but we don't see any actual fighting. While most of us like are sweating in our knee pits at the thought of somebody burning a library, certainly, the narrative doesn't linger on this atrocity. We are very quickly whisked away to an enchanting setting featuring cats with wings and singing trees and apple birds and mer horses and a lot of jam, so much jam making, and a bakery. But this genre happened because a lot of bookish folks were craving stuff that didn't stress them out more than they already were stressed out in their real life. So you can see why it might be then a bit of an issue to market something as cozy when it is not. Like, in particular, to market this kind of genre for the reason why it exists, to mismarket using it is so shitty. So again, I did an entire video on the unfortunate side effects of heartbreak and magic by Brienne Randall, and the link is down below. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, but when I picked up a book that is pitched as Gilmore Girls meets practical magic, you go into that thinking a certain set of things. I picked it up knowing exactly what happened because I was forewarned that it's not cozy. A bunch of people on Goodreads who have reviewed this book cannot say the same because they feel fucking bamboozled. When you hear Gilmore Girls meets practical magic, you think midnight margaritas, old family recipes passed down in a yellow paged ancient tome, and fresh baked bread, and instead the recipes may or may not have come from websites off the internet. They sound a little too close to me for that to not be a red flag. And also some of them contained essential oils, name brand ones. So that definitely wasn't a family recipe. But most of all, if I pitch a book as Gilmore Girls meets practical magic and say that it's cozy fantasy more than once, if I'm the reader and I'm picking that up without being forewarned, I'm not thinking I'm going into a book with a suicide attempt on page. And certainly not a book that also has a lot of Christian rhetoric in it, like a lot of unchecked Christian rhetoric in it that is wrapped up with the magic. Again, I just felt completely bamboozled by the marketing of this book, and had the author and the publisher been honest about what it was about, I mean, I don't think that a lot of people would have picked it up. Like, it was picked up because people thought that it was cozy, and that's why it was marketed that way, assumedly, is because they thought that they could get the cozy readers to buy it. I guess they just thought the cozy readers would be like, oh, it's not cozy, bummer, and instead the entire Goodreads of this is just like, what the fuck? Every book, good or bad, has its audience. I'm sure someone out there read Silver Elite and loved that shit. I don't know who they are, but they exist. Couldn't be me, but it's somebody, and that is okay. But one thing that we as a community, I don't think really should just accept, is seeing authors and publishers mismarket books and just not saying anything, even if it's their debut, which is something that people said about Unfortunate Side Effects. Oh, it's her debut. I don't think that if it's your first or 7th or 70th book, it gives you the right to market your book as cozy, knowing that cozy readers are going to pick it up, only to be told, hey, this isn't cozy, and an on-page suicide attempt with no trigger warning is actually kind of harmful for some people, and then to say, I never called it cozy, my publisher did, except, yes, you did. I don't think that we should accept that, especially from a genre that is specifically there to comfort people. Like, I'm not the only person in this community who struggles with mental health. I've been pretty transparent about that on my channel, while still maintaining like boundaries and privacy. And as somebody who struggles, I simply cannot read something that I know is going to trigger me, which is why warnings are so helpful, which is why accurate marketing is so helpful. Now, I don't think that there should be like laws demanding that authors do this. I think that we should just like communally be able to say like, hey, here's my book. What trigger warnings do you think I should put? Get input from a lot of people. Do our absolute best by each other. I don't think there should be laws about this, because then we're getting into the same territory that like book banners get into. So for instance, my resident county book banner, Julie Gephardt's, is starting to pick up on the same language as her friend, resident county book banner of Clay County, Florida, Bruce Friedman, where he says he wants books to be more not accurately marketed, but he says that they are books that have inadequate summaries. And what he means by this is, and what Julie means by this is that if a book does not literally say that it's about lesbians, then it has bamboozled you into reading about lesbians. And I've complained about this before, about how people who are queer phobic want to lump in trigger warnings with queer people existing. And I don't ever want to sound like that. I don't want to advocate for that. That's not what I'm doing. What I am saying is, I think we do need to understand that some things are harmful to mental health. So like reading on-page suicide attempts where we are seeing a person go through each step and attempt at ending their own life and then not being successful because somebody else intervened at the last minute, I do think that that's something that warrants a trigger warning in the beginning of the book. Now, it's also on consumers to look into reviews and to tell each other about what's in a book so that we can all find the right books for us. So that's part of what I do here, and that's also how I found out about the content of Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic. If nobody on the internet had been honest about that, I would have never known, and I could have gone into this book blind and possibly been harmed by it in a way that you simply don't become harmed by queer people just existing. So conflating those two things is just honestly ridiculous. Now, is it the responsibility of the author to know every single trigger when there's not really like a definitive list? And I don't think that there should be. No, I do think that though it is your responsibility to not lie. I think that if you are writing a book that has a certain kind of content that most people don't define as cozy, you don't call your book cozy and then get called out for it and then later say, I never did that, that was my publisher, except yes, you did. Like I can't not keep coming back to how shitty that is to do to consumers. Is it Lisa Jewell's fault that she didn't put, hey, there's a miscarriage in this book and it's kind of awful? No, I would have liked to know, and I wish somebody had told me, but I don't think that Lisa Jewell like owes me an apology. It is still my responsibility to try to look stuff up, and if I feel like a friend is not looking up a book before they read it and I know it has something in it that could trigger a panic attack for them, the way that reading about miscarriage does for me, I tell them. For instance, my aforementioned friend Allie, if I know that a book contains death of a parent, particularly death of a parent by cancer, that's gonna wreck Allie's mental health, and I warn her beforehand and I give her some details so that she can avoid it. I think that we as human beings have the obligation to try as best as we can to take care of each other. Don't think that that's like a legal obligation as far as like trigger warnings and stuff, but I do think that at least don't lie. Do your best to help people avoid content that might hurt them, like suicide attempts. Like I really have to be in the best frame of mind before I read certain things. And this goes for my kids too. And it's going to change throughout your life. So like right now, my youngest kid can't read stuff about zombies. So it's my responsibility as the parent to look that stuff up beforehand. It's my responsibility to look up reviews and find, whether or not a book is for me. But if the only information that exists is what the author puts out there and it's not true, what else what else is there for consumers? Like, it's putting that consumer in a really tough position. Like, don't mismarket cozy fantasy, especially cozy fantasy, because cozy fantasy was for a particular audience looking for a particular thing because of another particular thing that is incredibly stressful. So while unfortunate side effects didn't send me into existential dread, it could be harmful, and that's why it got pushed back. As a Forever Fundy though, it did give me a jump scare when I find out that the magic is Bible based, and I do want to know about that stuff as well. And even like the now existing trigger warning about that is so vague, I don't think it's helping consumers. So if you are gonna write a trigger warnings list, do it correctly and do what consumers are actually asking, which is inform us as much as possible so that we can make well-informed purchasing decisions and decisions on, how to spend our time with the media that we consume. I'm not advocating for laws, I'm just saying, could we do the right thing by each other? And also, in Unfortunate Side Effects, not to rehash this book again, because I already did it for an hour and a half, the characters are very adamant that they are not witches. So it's weird to market this as practical magic, which has witches that, our girlies in practical magic are 100% definitely witches. So I don't know why we had to besmirch the cherished whimsicore masterpiece with this book that doesn't want to call itself witches because Christianity, I guess? For many people, including myself, and this is subjective and I'll talk about it later, the suicide attempt on page disqualifies it from the cozy category. But who decides that, right? For me, that super does not scream cozy. I can't think of anything more high stakes than an attempt to die by suicide. Again, like we talked about earlier, the stakes are not life and death, and that kind of puts it in the category of literal life and death, right? The main character felt that she had no other choice and elected to try to die by suicide, and then she was saved by another character in the process of dying. So to look at the stakes between Spell Shop and Unfortunate Side Effects, there's such a stark contrast there, where the stakes are maybe kind of this vague empire might come arrest me if I'm doing magic, and maybe I'll try to hide these singing trees and I'll sell some jam, versus if I don't die by suicide, then my brother is going to be the one who dies. That, I don't understand how we ever classified such a thing as cozy, personally. But again, who decides this? Who decided this in the first place? And maybe you can say that a small town is cozy, but is that enough to call it cozy fantasy? Not to me, and not to a whole lot of other readers who gave feedback saying just that. So who decides what's cozy and what's not? Am I the arbiter? I keep returning to the to me of it all. To me, a book marketed as cozy should likely not contain an on-page attempt to die by suicide. But who wrote these rules and when? Because if we look at what cozy fantasy is culturally now, we can see how older media that also contains some stuff that's probably questionable also falls under this umbrella. There's a Reactor magazine article entitled 60s Fantasy Sitcoms and the Rise of Cozy Fantasy, which says, the mid-60s gave rise to a handful of fantasy sitcoms, sometimes called magicoms, which included Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, The Addams Family, and The Munsters, all of which I definitely grew up watching. Not in the 60s, I'm not that old. Referencing Bewitched, the article says, the fantastical is present, but while other types of fantasy stories focus on world-ending stakes and all manner of magical threats, the fantasy here is more about finding, after a long night of entertaining, you can simply move your hands or twitch your nose and all your kitchen cleaning is done. These characters happily reject the larger world and instead choose to live contained lives with their extended families or found families with an unassuming level of determination. As the outside world has become more hectic and disruptive, the appeal of living happily contained domestic lives seems to become more and more appealing, at least for some of us Who doesn't want to spend more time at home with a warm drink of your choice and a hobby to keep you occupied? A personal mantra of mine for 2023 is say no and do less. I don't want to girl boss my way through life, thank you very much. I want to do a manageable amount of work, get a reasonable amount of sleep, talk to friends and family enough. If I could blink and have my laundry done and dinner ready, I promise you I would. These goals, while they're not the kind of things that never rate a mention in more epic fare, are the kind of thing that cozy fantasy books understand and try to revel in. In talking to Allie about this, I said that cozy fantasy books scream to me like ASMR is a book. It's really about like taking the time to smell everything. It's a book about smelling the pages of a book. It's a book about really sitting and staring at that cup of tea in your hands and like reveling in the small moments and all of the different sensory aspects. This article discusses the pandemic, which changed a lot of things for publishing, but one of them was the increased interest in at-home activities. So we talked about like how I played a lot of The Sims. A lot of people got really into Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing. Craftsy, which I mentioned earlier, was a major hub for a few friends of mine during the pandemic who had taken up different at-home interests. So sourdough baking, like I mentioned, but also painting. One of my friends got really into painting. One of my friends got really into seamstress work. The article says, it is fair to say that aesthetics like cottagecore, cottagecore, goblincore, which all embrace the relaxing nature of homemaking, also experienced a bit of a boom. These trends support a reclaiming of home space activities as restorative and an extension of important self-care that anyone can engage with and enjoy. So perhaps it's unsurprising that I've noticed similar kinds of narrative focus on magic as a tool for homemaking or family in the recent boom in cozy fantasy books. So while cozy fantasy is a newer term, it is a genre that is rooted in history and rooted in nostalgic old media that is also cozy. Yet it's also a genre that developed very specifically now, the way it is now, due to lockdown. So the convention of this newly coined genre are sort of still in a state of development that is ongoing, and we're still defining like where this came from. This is also probably like very specifically American, so you kind of have to take that into account when you're looking at this and sort of zoom out. I don't mean to jump scare you, but I had to take all my makeup off, go pick up my kids from daycare, and a bitch can't be bothered anymore. So now we're actually getting cozy and ditching the forest fairy look for tired goth millennial that I normally am. Cool? Okay. This is a new genre, and yet it has genre conventions. And some people, like the Reactor magazine article, would say that the genre conventions are based in media that we didn't classify as cozy until now. So we've been eating up not just the shows of the 1960s collectively as a society. Again, this is like an American thing. So we've also been consuming comfort films, cozy adjacent comfort films for decades. So there are still the girlies who are rightfully obsessed with the 1998 film Practical Magic, which, you know, now those people who loved Practical Magic are now being marketed to, sometimes incorrectly, as we've talked about. Even though that story does get a little darker, I think some people would consider that cozy. So again, like who makes the rules, right? But the overall vibe of that movie is whimsy goth. Sort of like if you mashed me that you were just watching a few minutes ago with makeup and a dress on, and me now. 1998 Practical Magic is the midnight margaritas, the lavender for luck, the tossing of salt over your shoulder, the witchiness. It's the movie that made everybody want to be a witch when they grew up. Much more so than the works written by the transphobic wench that we do not speak of. She can eat a dick. This genre, whether or not I think there'll be a book that is in this genre that gives it that I could give 5 stars or not, this genre has its place. And for some people, it's a necessity. For some people, this is the only thing that they can read and give 5 stars. Do I prefer books with more plot and more stress? For some reason, sure. Those aren't the only books that need to exist, though. Not every movie needs to be a Marvel movie full of flashbangs and sacrifice and I love you 3000s. We can all collectively cry over that after the video is over. We've always yearned for media, though, that comforts, and we retreat to nostalgia. So if you look at nostalgic movies, like, for me, nostalgic movie is Ever After. For me, a nostalgic movie is 2005's Pride and Prejudice. You can also look at movies that are even just a contemporary romance like You've Got Mail with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. These are two human embodiments of golden retrievers. One who runs a independent bookstore, God bless her, and one who owns the version of Barnes & Noble in that world, which is, I think it's Fox Books, right? So they exchange emails anonymously and they fall in love before they know that they're the other's well, he knows that he's her competition. She doesn't know. Well, they do fall in love, and then eventually he figures out that it's her, and then he just keeps it going. It's real cute. The stakes are that Tom Hanks's character's bookstore could put Meg Ryan's bookstore out of business, and she hates Tom Hanks's character but doesn't know that it's him she's also emailing. So the stakes are really like she could find out and be like, fuck off, man. Which would be sad because we're starting to hope that they'll be together, but it's not like Jurassic Park up in here. It's a comfort movie. It's a warm hug of a movie. And I think that we are and we're still craving comfort and nostalgia in our media. I know some people my age and slightly older are longing for something more simple because everything feels so complicated. And you don't get to use media to opt out of real life. We still, I think, have a responsibility to each other. But sure, I can understand wanting to escape into something comforting, which is what I am doing when I watch 2005's Pride and Prejudice, and it's what a lot of people are doing when they only read cozy books. Something about like being a kid and having like no understanding of the world and having like no real responsibility to it is what we're doing when we enter into something like a cozy fantasy. I don't own an independent bookstore. So watching Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks fall in love when they could, break up, even though he could put her out of business, that doesn't affect me at all. The stuff in the spell shop doesn't affect me at all. Unfortunate side effects, again, this is why I don't think this fits in this genre, is very different. I think cozy media can make you feel like a kid again, and I did grow up watching You Got Mail. And even further, it can make you feel like a kid because you feel like you're playing again. You can pretend to make potions when you're a kid and nobody makes fun of you if you do it now. Everybody's like, what the fuck are you doing? You're 33. You can pretend to have a whole farm. It feels like that. It feels like a genre of that. But I am an adult, and for some reason, I do like stress that isn't mine. So I need that balance. One video that I watched a bit of was Lyanna from Lyannas Library did a video on cozy fantasy, and I didn't finish it because I wanted to make this video first and come back to it, but one thing she talked about in the beginning of her book, in the beginning of her video, is there is something so delightful about watching characters that you really like sit down at a tavern and eat delicious food, and they're listening to a bard and there's beautiful music and you're in this setting and it feels cozy and comforting. But when it's just a whole book of that, it's a little bit too much. It's sickly sweet almost. Not her words, those are mine, where it's a little too much. So on the one hand, I miss playing, I miss being a kid, but on the other hand, I am still an adult and I don't want to just play all the time. I do want the mess too. I want the stakes. I want the life or death that isn't mine. I like stress that isn't mine. And when I don't have that in a book, it doesn't quite hit the same for me. And that's the thing is I keep coming back to, again, for me, to me, right? So to bring this back to genre conventions, I don't want to dictate them myself or be the arbiter, but I think if cozy is defined by the masses as being rooted in the media that we discussed previously, and cozy is defined by the masses as comforting elements of like that nostalgic media, plus lower stakes that are not life and death, plus high vibes and low stress, as well as characters that you find very endearing at the least and love at the most and, want to sit side by and sit down and have a cup of coffee with them, then the unfortunate side effects of Heartbreak and Magic does not fit. It never fit. But the spell shop does, and maybe cozy fantasy will evolve further. I mean, it like rapidly grew over the years, even though it is rooted in nostalgic media. But as of now, that is the general consensus for what cozy fantasy is. So again, the spell shop certainly fits, and I think it has character, and I give it a 4. I thought the romance was sweet. I thought Keely as a main character was a little bit frustrating, especially in the beginning. I didn't understand why she was so grouchy towards the love interest, but Kaz, her spider plant, makes her more endearing, and everybody around Keely makes Keely more endearing. Well, I don't know if they make her more endearing or just more bearable. In the beginning, it was a little rough being around Keely, to be honest with. Like, I too am a person who really loves books and has a hard time getting along with people, but Keely like took it to a whole nother level for no reason with her love interest. just sort of like, it's just, why were you being so mean and snappy with him? And all he did from the go was be nice to you. And I love other elements of it. I love the side characters. I love the small town. I feel like we really got the most out of the small town, which is something that I had an issue with in Unfortunate Side Effects is, I don't even know where to begin to tell you how much this is not Gilmore Girls, though it told you it was. There is something kind of Gilmore Girls about Spell Shop, certainly. And Gilmore Girls is, again, another piece of nostalgic media. Now, I should say that nostalgic media, just because we love something in the past does not mean we should be uncritical of it, because there's a lot, and like even in that Reactor article, it brings up I Dream of Jeannie, and it talks about like, hey, sure, it's nostalgic and stuff, but it also did some Orientalism, like especially in the first episode. Maybe we shouldn't just like uncritically examine that. We should probably look and see like, hey, that's fucked up. It's a really good article. It even brings up at that point when it talks about Orientalism, Edward Said. So I'm going to link it down below. I think you should read it. So just because something is nostalgic does not mean we should be uncritical of it. I just want to make that clear. And that's a whole other topic. So bring it back to the Spell Shop. Sorry. I wanted to love it more. I think that it's reminiscent of nostalgic comfort media. I think it has a lot of character. It has a lot of charm. I love a Spell Shop. Period. I love magical books. I love books with magic that have a lot of food in them. I love a sentient spider plant who is an anxious being like myself. And there's a variety of magical creatures, including cats with wings. I love that. But my favorite books that have magical creatures are also books that have intense plot. So I've talked about like, I could do a whole other video on magical creatures, but like one of my favorite books with magical creatures is Winterkeep in the Graceling Saga. Adventure Fox is the best. And the book does not work without Adventure Fox, who you get POVs from, and the stakes are incredibly high. They are life or death. So I love books with magical animals. I just prefer the stakes. I want people to be in danger that aren't me. But I love magical creatures, and I love a richly described setting like in the Spell Shop, one that I can like almost actually smell. But I want something a little more salty to balance out my sweet. When I was talking about this book with Lou, she said I'm like that Hosier song. She's like, oh, so you take your whiskey neat. And I guess so. I guess it's too sweet for me. It's like when you're eating something and you think, if this just had this one other seasoning, it would be perfect. It's almost perfect. It's missing something key. And that's my issue with the Spell Shop, is every time there was like a problem, it was very easily solved. And that happened over and over and over again. And I don't feel like it justified its page length for how many problems that came up that were so easily fixable. And it felt like it was pretending to have some stakes rather than actually having them. That's the issue where I feel like cozy fantasy for me is always going to be 4 or less stars. You're just too sweet for me. I want to sob. I want to be hurt. I want to ache. I'm like that line from Sleep Token. Do you push into constant aching? I do. Yes. I love when books hurt. And I don't think cozy fantasy has the ability to hurt me enough for me to love it. What a crazy sentence. But I am willing to read the sequel of the Spell Shop, which is The Enchanted Greenhouse. And it does sound like there are stakes. So talking with Allie, talked to me about it. Allie told me about it. And she said that The Enchanted Greenhouse, the sequel, which features a character, the character that created Kaz, the sentient spider plant, it features a character who was turned into a statue and unbecomes a statue, which is a really cool premise. And it also explores the consequences of colonization. The lead character laments over lost languages and culture due to a campaign to wipe out indigenous traditions of the lands that the empire that fell in the Spell Shop had conquered. It sounds good, but and she's on an island full of greenhouses, which sounds really cool. Again, I think Sarah Beth Durst has the ability to write incredible settings that I want to slip into, but without the possibility of like higher stakes and the page count not being justified in the Spell Shop, even though I think the Enchanted Greenhouse is a little bit shorter, I'm just nervous about it being sort of like the same of it's feeling long for no justified reason. And I'm worried about it being the same beats and not setting itself apart from its predecessor enough for me to feel like it's a 4 or even a 3, because what if it's too similar? I hate 3-star reads. I would rather love something 5 stars, or I would honestly rather hate something. I would rather give it 1 star. I would rather hate it, because then at least I'd like feel something. I hate feeling middle of the road about things. But one that might be the exception, to my, I think these cozy fantasy books are going to be 4 stars or less rules/assumption that I have here, is this one, which is Recipes for an Unexpected Afterlife by Dustin J. Munden. I started this, and this is already hitting a little bit different because of the setting and because of who the main character is in this setting. Maybe just changing that element of the recipe for cozy fantasy. Wow, nice, Rachel. Maybe just that can be the secret ingredient. Oh my God, I keep going to make a 5-star cozy fantasy for me. Even though it's not life or death, which this can't be because we're already in the afterlife. And that's what I think sets it apart. So this is about a guy named Rotgor who's an orc and he's worn out. Literally, he's being held together by dark magic in the afterlife. He has been protecting Necropolis for a really long time. In the beginning, you see when he's still alive, but then after that, like the first chapter is him still alive, and then after that, it switches over to his afterlife, and specifically his afterlife after he's already been dead a while and doing all kinds of things in the afterlife that are exhausting. So now he's in retirement in the afterlife. So he opens a restaurant in the afterlife where the city's undead and living residents can share food and community. So he's helped in his quest by, a found family. Cozy fantasy isn't cozy fantasy without a found family, in my opinion. That's another genre convention I think is true. But I don't want to say that as a hard and fast rule because I'm sure that there are others that don't have that. But it's a very typical element of cozy fantasy books. And he's also being helped out by this young orphan girl named Astra, who can't have anybody find out her ancestry because if anybody finds out, it could put the entirety of Necropolis in danger. So to protect both the life that he's building with his new restaurant and Astra, Rotgor has to face his past and form new alliances based on loyalty and friendship and love and food. This gentle fantasy traces how even a dark history can rise into a bright future. And I love the idea of the main character having a darker history and grappling with the consequences of that. So even though it's not life or death, that feels like it might be enough stakes combined with the interesting setting to be a 5-star read of a cozy fantasy. And also, this is being published by Cozy Quill through Bindery, which is run by none other than Queen of Cozy, Meg's Tea Room, who is a friend of mine. And obviously for that reason, I hope I love it, but I did start it and it is not only written well, but it is, again, such a unique premise that you are instantly like, I kind of want to understand what's happening here more and more and more. And it's real easy to turn pages in this. So this might be the one. This might be the 5. If you have anything that is cozy fantasy but has those unique elements, let me know because I'm looking for that. I'm looking for that exception to that rule. So I'll finish it and I'll let you know. Let me know what other ones I can read because we can keep talking about where cozy works and it doesn't for us, for me, for you, because again, all of this is subjective. If you made it this far, leave a cup of coffee below or whatever cozy emoji you can think of, a cup of tea or whatever. Let me know if you've read any of these or what's the coziest book that you've ever read, or if you read cozy. I want to read I do want to read your comments. I want to hear all of your comments about your thoughts on cozy. Thank you so much for watching. Check out Recipes for Unexpected Afterlife on Goodreads. It is not out yet. It does come out in October. And again, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye. Hi, before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Ashley H, Beck, Call Me Kodiak, Choco's Homesick for Taiwan, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emerald Dodge, Eric D, Jade, Jill, John E, Jory, Julie, Kai Brecker has not read 6 of Crows, Kalane OK, Katya, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lady Chips Loves Pride, Lemon Jelly, Lex, Other Lex, Lily, Maddie Miss, Megwin Rose, Melissa, Mixer Boneless, Not So Secretly a Skeleton, Peggy Lou Who, Piloting SRN, Rain, Ree, SJ, Samar, Scarlet, Steph B, 3 Raccoons in a Trench Coat, Urchin Audrey, and White Raven 13. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. Huge thank you to my Potato Starch Marxist patrons, Aaron, Alejandra, Alicia, Bobisha, Banana, Fofana, Fofisha. What are we doing? Alicia, Althea, Amanda D, Andy, Angelica, Artie the Ninth, Ava, Barry, Baywing, Beck, Blue Moon Syrup, Bookish by Jenna, Bookish Rabbit, Bridget 108, Kate B, Caitlin, Carlin, Carly, Casper, Kate, Kathy, Celeste, Che, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic Frog, Courtney, Darius, Danielle, Danita, Darren, Desiree Michelle, Dilf Enthusiast, Dorothea Supports Public Education, Draco-chan, Drive-By Thinker, Ebby, Emma, Aaron with 2 E's, Erica May, Aaron Starlight, Fox Waifu, Francis, Gadarn, Hannah C, Helen P, Hurry Singh, JM Tennant, Jackalope Max, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Genderqueer, Jenny G, Jesse Ives, Jessa Sue, Jojo Bookish, Juicy Wizard, Caitlin M, Katie L, Katrina, Kayla, Kaylee, Kayala, Kendra, Kiara, KMTB, Kayana, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura is Angry, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Lindsay M, LP, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Mataraptor, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Megan, Malara, Mima Who, Morgan the Friendly Ghost, Myth Lesbian, NM Rap, Natural Blues, Nicole G, Paige P, Penelope, Penny Chilling, Foxglove, Pick a God and Pray, Plague Carrier, Pandemonium, Queen Cereal, Rach, Rachel B, Rebecca, Rebecca R, Ren Flynn, Rhea, Reese, Ronnie, Rosie, Sikoria, Saintbringer, Sakya Lume, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, Sophie, Talia, That One Cute Chick, This Is Not a Trap, Too Thick to Work Tomorrow, Triple M, Taito Phoenix, and Unicorn Jenny. Thank you all so much for being a friend.